Welcome to the Entre Pastors Podcast on YouTube. This is a show that helps pastors think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs. Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Entre Pastors Podcast on YouTube. My name's John Sanders. I'm one of the hosts of the show, and today I'm so excited to introduce you to the guest that you're going to be hearing from. We love this guy. His name is Austin Brooks, and he has become a good friend of myself and my other co-host, Les Hughes. And Austin grew up in and around pastoral ministry. Like, this guy understands the church world. He was a big part of it growing up. But what he found was that God had put something in his heart for ministry, but ministry that happened largely beyond the four walls of the church. And so Austin is very much an entrepreneur. He has an incredible, it's really a nonprofit, but I would contend it's just as much a ministry as anything else, that serves high school students, juniors and seniors all across the country. It's a program called CEO, Creating Entrepreneurial Opportunities, and he works with high schoolers all over the nation. It's an incredible story of what he is building there, he and his team. But he really has a heart for business and ministry, so it makes him a perfect fit for our tribe and the kind of conversations that we love to have here. So you're going to be inspired by this. I can't wait for you to meet my friend Austin. Without any further ado, check out this conversation that myself and Les had with Austin Brooks. Here we go. Well, Austin, welcome to the Entre Pastors Podcast, my man. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hey, so happy to be here. I feel like we've been having so many great conversations about entrepreneurship, so it's pretty cool to jump on here and spend time with your amazing community.
Absolutely. And you are part of us, man. The minute I met you and we started talking, I was like, sometimes you just know, like, you get someone, like, I get him. He gets me. We're in the same tribe. Speak a lot of the same language, even though we're in different parts of the country, working on different projects. You and I have some real similarities. And so why don't we start by just giving an introduction to our audience of your life, growing up in pastoral ministry. You can definitely relate to our people. So tell a little bit of your story as far as it pertains to your upbringing in ministry.
Sure. Well, I think a good place to start is where I'm at now. I'm currently the executive director of an organization called Midland Institute for Entrepreneurship, and we teach high school kids how to run their own businesses. But I've had such a long journey and I really feel like God's been preparing me for an opportunity like this, to have an impact on the next generation. But for me, I grew up in the church. I'm a PK. My dad, senior pastor for 27 years. He's one, there's a lot of people in ministry these days, but he's someone I truly respect. He truly walks the walk and just great leader. And I've looked up to him. He's one of my foremost mentors and people I respect in the world. But yeah, he's senior pastor. So that means all the things that come along with being a PK. If there's any PKs listening today, Yep. But very thankful I grew up in the church. And I even worked for a church for 3.5 years. I kind of went the youth ministry route and ran a more outreach focused youth ministry. Absolutely loved it. But the longer I served within the walls of the church, I realized my heart was really outside of the walls of the church in terms of the unchurched and just people who maybe didn't grow up in church like I did. So I've always very much looked at, community organizations, community efforts, and been very attracted to, what you can do maybe outside of a church to have very much kingdom impact. And that has led me on a very unique roller coaster. I was a filmmaker for a while. I was a content creator. I worked for the Cardinals, Rams, and Blues. So I've worked around professional sports, done some what the kids I work with today call cool jobs. But ultimately, I couldn't be more happy in investing the next generation and installing the entrepreneurial mindset at a high school level.
Well, I can tell just from talking with you that you still have a heart for the young generation, for the next generation. And we're going to unpack in our time together. We'll talk a lot about the work that you do with the CEO program that's in high schools around the country. But backing up a little bit to your upbringing, you grew up in the church and you had a season where you worked in the church, right? Like you're serving as a youth pastor, but you made a statement a minute ago that my heart was outside the walls of the church. I'm curious. I want to drill down into that a little bit. As someone who grew up in a pastor's home and kind of probably inherited so much of that narrative that we get in the church world about, full-time Christian service and what that looks like. I mean, there's some very limited options that are presented to us. Well, you can be a missionary, You can be a pastor, you can work for maybe a nonprofit or a parachurch, even though we're not always excited about those. But, pretty much you're working inside the church, and here you are now in that space, but going, I really have a heart that's taking me beyond the four walls of the church. I'd love to hear your description of, like, did you have any, struggles you had to overcome, like feeling guilty about that or getting permission to realize that there's actually ministry that happens outside the four walls of the church? Or was that an easy step for you to maneuver that?
Yeah, I think in any organization or any ministry specifically, there's always kind of that tension of like, how you're hearing God's voice. And so for me, I just kept feeling like more and more it was people who weren't, in rural America. I live in a smaller rural community of about 12,000 in population. My dad's church, the church he pastored, it's 1,000+ people. So that's a massive church in a small town. And, it's not like there's not other churches in this community. We live in an amazing community and kind of just the Bible Belt, right? And just so to see a rural church build up like that. But what I started seeing is, there was a lot of people who had Christian worldview and great values. And I'm like, we could work together, right? And so I think, as I looked around the community, it's like, why can't we work with them? Or, for the unchurched, church people were all doing really good. But what about the people who they just were in families that had not been in church for a couple generations, right? Or not at all. And so I think I just started feeling that tug of, and I do want to clarify. So the organization I worked with, I was the director of an organization called 180, and Willie George in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at Church on the Move. And Willie George, it might be an older name to some, but he's someone I followed as a young man, 15 years ago. But they had this youth startup called 180, and it was just a very, fun and off kind of the beaten path of a church campus that would be offsite. And so our church really followed in a lot of that vision. And the vision for the church at the time, my dad's church that I grew up in, was strengthening families by reaching the next generation for Christ. I still remember that vision statement, that mission statement, because it's in a weird kind of way. So many of us who grew up as a youth in that church, it's very much what we do to this day, right? Wow. But I just remember 180 Tulsa, and we were inspired by it. And the church that I grew up going to, which was just a non-denominational church in rural America, they purchased an old tractor farm supply building. And what was so interesting about that is they remodeled it and made it 100% for the youth of the community. And you didn't even have to go to that church. It was just, multiple nights of the month, it would be opened up for high schoolers, junior high kids to kind of get out from, maybe just drinking in a barn. Again, I said I'm from rural America. That's what people do, or cow tipping, or, being up to no good, and spending time around good people. Right. And so just kind of that outreach bug really hit me hard. And it was crazy. I mean, we'd have 200, 300, 400 kids a night when we were open. And it was kind of the coolest thing in the middle of nowhere. And so, my eyes started, I just started looking towards, and there's a lot more people who are outside the walls of this church. And, how are we really reaching them? And that kind of encouraged me to look at each step I took after that in terms of my personal growth.
So when did you learn for yourself that you were an entrepreneur? That's one question. Like, tell me about kind of your entrepreneurial journey, but then I want to kind of reconcile that with ministry. Because again, going back to my last question about, so often we're presented with this, if you want to do ministry, this is how ministry is done. And it's rarely I never was presented with that as business as an option for that you can be an entrepreneur and be in ministry. So tell me a little bit about your journey. Then we'll fast forward into kind of the work you're doing with high school students today, but I want to hear about your journey first.
Yeah. So I think for me, junior high school, I was buying and selling products. I think the job that probably is the clearest to tell a story about is I did lawn care. One of my first businesses was, I was like Bobby Boucher. I was driving my mower around to as far as, I could around kind of our local neighborhoods. And I would just knock on people's doors. I'm like, hey, you need your yard mowed? Hey, you need your yard mowed? And what I started picking up on, even at a high school age, I said, I realized people who had nice cars in their driveway, I wanted to mow their yards because they usually could pay me what I was asking, right? So I could either do because I started learning from a young age is, your time is a resource. So I could mow a lot of yards for less money, or I could mow the nicest yards for more money. And I think business from a young age was always kind of there, that entrepreneurial thinking, but it got cultivated because, my parents encouraged it. They gave me permission to, hey, Austin, you're in sports, or you got a lot going on. You got to find something that's flexible. And lawn care was something I did high school, college age, and, worked my way up, had a lot of local yards. And led to some pretty ridiculous stories and deep connections and people I still talk to this day. But yeah, landscaping was kind of the gateway drug to entrepreneurship for me.
There you go. I share a similar story. I'd mowed a lot of lawns in my high school. I'd do anything for a couple bucks, so I was a hustler too, like that. But I didn't know I was an entrepreneur. It took a long time, even into my pastoral years as a church planter and then multi-site, launching campuses, to realize, wait a minute, God is tapping into something. Like, I never understood why the whole time I'm in ministry, there's also this, like, why do I like business podcasts so much? Why do I love the story of the successful startup? Why is one of my favorite podcasts How I Built This? Like, I never could really reconcile that. And it took me a while to really take ownership of this message. John, you're an entrepreneur. That's how God made you that way. You don't need to feel guilty about being in those spaces. You need to do more of it because it's who God made you to be.
Yeah. Well, just kind of tapping into that and really being honest on the journey I've been on, and even kind of the road I've struggled down, is kind of abandoning that poverty mindset that I think sometimes naturally pairs itself with people who really care about, serving the Lord and being deep into ministry. Right. Yeah. And so I'll admit, you guys had this amazing 4-day challenge. I love this community that you're building. And so many people right now are hungry to learn how to anything from create a side hustle to, grow a venture, while they're still in ministry, or maybe they want something in place of ministry. Right. And so I love your community. I think it's super needed. But I snuck on. I saw you not only had your 4-day challenge, you threw it up live on your Facebook group. And so because I'd recently joined, I snuck in for a few minutes, and you guys were talking about scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset. And truly, that's something I've been going through the last 10 years, because I even remember back, I guess this is longer than 10 years ago. But the yards I mowed, there was a lady who had a Porsche, a convertible Porsche. And I always grew up driving beaters. I had to pay for my first car. But it was a nice car. And I'm like, who is this lady? And she was an executive for Motorola who had a lake house. And, we built a bond over the 2-3 years I mowed her yard. And I remember she let me borrow her car one time. And I was brave enough to ask her as a high school kid for prom. I said, hey, can I borrow your car? And she's like, yeah, it's just a piece of metal. Here you go. But you can drive stick shift, right? And so I lied to her face like a good, pastor's kid. And I told her, absolutely. I learned to drive. Yeah. I learned to drive stick between that time. She trusted me enough to drive her car, but I remember that seed being planted. I'm like, man, this is fun, but if I want these nice things, that's evil, that's bad. And so there was always this tension. It's like, I knew that even then, I'm like, I would love to, make more money than my family, because I do need to say at this point in the story, my dad's a pastor, my dad's a pastor. This is the family business is ministry. And so I felt like I was really going against the norm, because I had these entrepreneurial thoughts, and I was actually pretty good at making money from a young age.
But your dad didn't put pressure on you to take up the family business, did he? Like, were you told growing up that, son, someday you're going to be the pastor of this church? Or some pastors' kids get that. I didn't, and I'm grateful for that. But I got a mild version of it, but it wasn't as bad as I've seen some other kids get it.
Yeah, I think he was just more concerned about our faith walk to make sure we were good and we weren't putting ourselves in bad places. So no, he was very encouraging of business, and he actually has very great business instincts himself. He just always prioritized, the kingdom work and the kingdom impact he wanted to do was through a church. But I truly believe if he was in business all those years, he's got a great mind for it. He just kind of chose that lane. So no, and not a lot of pressure, probably not as much pressure that was like my grandfather who's passed away to my dad. That pressure was absolutely there. So I think he was very mindful of that. I even had that stretch where I thought, ultimately being that youth pastor, being that director of that 180 location, I started thinking, what's the potential for advancement, which is very much a business term, which is the world I work now. And what I realized, I'm like, the next step's a pastor, and it just wasn't in my heart to do that. So yeah, I never felt guilted into it in any way.
That's good. That's good. Here's how it happened for me, how I would get kind of that pressure. It was more lumped on all of us. And by us, I mean men. My dad would say this, so I'm not trying to exclude the ladies in this, but my dad would always say growing up, and you have to know kind of the circles that he came from, but he would say all young men should head for the ministry. And then if God doesn't want you there, he'll close the door. Now, what that meant was all young men should graduate high school and go to Bible college, seminary, and then be either a missionary or pastor, and only stop if God tells you to stop. Otherwise, and I was pretty sure that was bad advice then. And even though I love, I'm grateful for my upbringing, and I had a lot of good to point back to, but I'm certain it's bad advice now. I wouldn't tell anybody, you should automatically head for vocational ministry unless God stands in your way and says no. I would approach it differently. So for me, it was presented like that. So it wasn't like, John, you should do this, but it was kind of like, John, you should do this, like you should go try. I think part of the reason that I didn't like that so much, Austin, is because I knew deep down, if I moved in that direction, God wasn't going to stop me. And I think that's what I really didn't want to wrestle with, like I just wanted to, go my own direction to begin with. So,
and let's even take it a step back. We're putting this on our parents who are preachers, and many of the listeners, might be PKs as well, but this exists in every industry. You think about those people who are doctors, they want their kids to consider people want to recommend what they know, the path they know. And I think that's a pressure facing way more people than just PKs.
You're probably right. I don't disagree, but I will say, I think, and maybe I'm just trying to claim some special status here, but I think with the church side of things, we can put a little bit of a spiritual spin on it to make it sound just a little bit more important than all those other things, where we have this divide. This is one of the big mindsets we come against on Entre Pastors on a regular basis, is that fictional divide between sacred and secular, that, well, pastors, we're doing sacred work. And the reason then it's so hard for us to think about marketplace stuff is somewhere along the line, we bought the narrative that says, well, that's secular. That's not God's work. That's not kingdom work. We do kingdom work from behind a pulpit, or inside our church office. How could we ever do kingdom work selling insurance or, building something out in the community? So anyway, I'm wrestling with some of this mindset stuff with you, because I know, as you and I have talked in the past, like you have a positive outlook on it. You have an outlook that we would love for many, many other pastors to adopt and go, I have permission. It's okay to either be in both arenas, or it's okay sometimes just to be in the other arena, to altogether, exercise my calling in a new season of ministry that doesn't even have me inside the four walls of the church. And that may sound like sacrilege and heresy to some, but listen, if that's where your heart is, go. I mean, seriously, that's thus says John. So you can wrestle with God on that, but that's my thoughts.
And I don't think, for young people, I love seeing them take internships at churches and work for churches for a season. But sometimes the best kingdom work can be even, the world, quote unquote, right? They need good, high character leaders, people with a Christian worldview, to, stand up strong and be impressive in the workplaces they work. And then also, I work with so many young entrepreneurs who are really toiling, like with the same things we're talking about, just, rewind 15 or 10, 15, 20 years, right? And they're like, I just feel, like I'm going to be abandoning my faith if I don't go into ministry, right?
Yep.
But I'm like, man, think about how much you could have an impact on the kingdom, because some of these kids, like, I just want to give, all my money away. I'm like, great. Well, let's work on making it, and then you can give it, right? And so I think, there's a lot of kingdom work that can be done through Christians that become strong and intentional and successful entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Well, why don't we spend a few minutes unpacking what you do with the CEO program? Tell us what it is, and then I'd love to hear some of the success stories, because you've got tons of them to share. So talk about the work that you're doing with high school age young people.
Yeah, so we've got this proven and 15-year-old learning environment called CEO. It's an acronym that stands for Creating Entrepreneurial Opportunities. And it was founded actually in Southern Illinois, where I lived back in 2008, 2009 was the very first class. But what started happening was community leaders were like, okay, what do we want? We want more entrepreneurs in our community. How are we going to get that? And so there was this world-class educator brought in. His name's Craig Linval, and he was just a high school teacher who basically built what he saw missing in the 35 years he was in education, the 35 years he was in education. So for him, he's the architect of CEO, and I really respected this man and watched our community get behind this kind of thinking. And it actually went so well the first couple of years, all the neighboring communities and counties around where the epicenter of CEO started, which is my home community of Effingham, Illinois. And they started knocking on the door saying, what is this program? How do we get it? So ultimately in 2010, Midland Institute for Entrepreneurship was formed, and started building a foundation to not only support the one-off program, but to expand to other communities that wanted to install the entrepreneurial mindset at a high school level. But there's some truly unique things about this learning environment where it's never in a classroom. It's always in a business. This is a year-long program, 5 days a week. So it's the coolest business course that, many of you out there probably never got to take. I never got to take it, but it immerses kids in their local community. So it's year long. So first semester, they'll do a class business, and then second semester, they'll actually do their own individual business. And I want to be really clear. They will create this business so it's actually live functioning, selling product or service in their home communities. And the reason we think that's so mission critical is, there's a lot of curriculums or even business classes that you can do a business plan and it just stops at business theory. When you really learn to earn and you're selling those products, it becomes contagious. It becomes a way of life. So that's what fires me up every year, even though we're in 10 states, 70 different communities, but we're in about 300 high schools nationwide. So still a lot of room for growth, but we're really happy in 15 years that we're working with that many communities. We have, over 1,000 businesses that are launched through high school students every year. So this is programs primarily for juniors and seniors in high school. Most of our programs are senior only. And it's every day, it's encouraging to see what high school kids are capable of, because I think as a nation, we expect too little from our high school age students. And if you create the right environment, it's amazing to see the transformation and the outcomes that can happen in their lives by just, like I said, immersing them in the local communities. So that's a little bit about our secret sauce. There's obviously so much more to get a program like this to be thriving in a local community. But what's amazing is year after year, we've got 4 more programs that just crossed over the 10-year mark to start seeing these students return to their home community. So if you're out there and you live in a rural community and you're worried about countering the brain drain, environments like this really flip the traditional economic development script on its heads, where you want to find that next manufacturing plant, the next restaurant, the next big thing to bring to town. What we're proposing to communities is, let's tap into your most valuable resource, your young people. Show them the value of a community or region. And then I'm telling you today, high school kids are deciding if they stay or go. If you live in a rural community or even a larger metro market, kids today see opportunity everywhere else except right in front of their face. Yep. So if you can get at a high school level and build their strongest network in the world in your home community, they're going to come back and start their businesses. They're going to come back and join the businesses in that local community. So even though we have this transformational experience that's deeply impacting the lives of these 16, 17, 18-year-olds that take it, we also really see us changing the outlook and the future of communities who, a lot of rural communities are aging, they're getting older. And so to see young people coming back in and buying buildings, after they get over that 10-year mark of having a program, we really think we're onto something.
Yeah. Well, this will resonate on some level, even with our audience of pastors, because coming from a rural community in South Dakota, small town, South Dakota, I can tell you that is real. Our young people naturally grow up thinking all the opportunity is out there, it's somewhere else. Well, what you're helping them do is realize I actually can create the opportunity right here in my own hometown. And that'll preach right there. This idea of sometimes opportunity is to be created by you, not necessarily to be found in a bigger, better place, So I love what you're doing. Is it possible for kids to take it 2 years in a row if they're a junior, or is it simply one and done? You go through the program 1 year and that's it?
Yeah, we've definitely seen some students take it back to back. We always let that be a local decision because we build a local chapter that actually will create a local job. So every time a program is launched, a local job is created because there needs to be a facilitator that leads this year-long experience. And so, if you're out there listening today and you're like, man, this sounds interesting, or maybe you're even looking at creating your future job, you get this program launched and going. We need strong, high character people leading these learning environments. And I know, John, kind of offline, you connected with some other of our CEO facilitators. And I know maybe they will be joining on this very podcast because there's some amazing people who've been training entrepreneurs at a very high level. But that facilitator role, we leave that up to that local decision when we definitely have had students take it back-to-back years. But we want to make sure as many seniors as possible are getting the opportunity. And that's kind of our focus these days.
Well, I just want to double down on that to make sure the people in the back who weren't listening hear what we just said. You basically said the way, one possible way to be involved with what you're doing is to be a local facilitator. When that happens, there's a job created. It could be your job that you're creating by saying, hey, I'll do this. And as soon as you said that, Austin, what went through my mind was, again, that let's just make this very relevant. For our traditional model has said, hey, if you want to be in youth ministry, then be a youth pastor. I would contend this is a way to be in youth ministry, and your financial dependence is not upon a church and the offerings that may or may not come in. It's puts you in the front lines working with teenagers in the local high school, doing some really cool life-changing work with them. But you're not, drinking Coke out of a, sock on Friday night and calling it a youth activity. You're building businesses with these kids. So, I mean, is that not valid youth ministry? I would contend it is.
Absolutely. And what I would add on to that is if I went back and, did my 20s over again, didn't youth ministry again, I would actually start by being a coach first. I would go start coaching tennis or soccer or football or something local where I could build deeper relationships, because, that's the front lines, and you're just naturally involved in their lives more. And so just like sports, if you want to coach young people with in business, even if you're still learning business yourself, let me share this one detail about a learning environment. Throughout the course of the school year, every student will have 40 guest speakers come speak to their class, and then they'll do 40 business visits in their local communities. And so what this means and why this matters is, and I'll be honest, if you're on here and you're in education, first off, thanks for what you're doing. If you've stuck through education at a teacher level, principal level, if you're administrator, superintendent, I just want to thank you for what you do. It's been a wild, last couple of years coming out of COVID. But some of my favorite people are in education. But that said, sometimes school people struggle with, wait, what is the textbook that drives your curriculum? And we don't have one, because the textbook for learning this entrepreneurial mindset, if they need to learn about marketing at a high level, they need to work with a local marketing director or marketing agency in your community. If they need to learn about financial literacy, well, they probably need to spend time with a really good local banker or CPA, or someone to coach them on what, how to manage their finances, right? And so the textbook is the community. So all the business leaders. So maybe you're not the facilitator out there, but if you want to bring this to your community, you might be a staple guest speaker or business visit that gets these students through your business so they understand how it operates. So when they do 40 business visits, they go from thinking this town has no opportunities to, holy cow, I've driven by this business my whole life and I had no idea it was here.
Wow.
And
cool.
And so if you are interested in that kind of facilitator side, if a program gets up and going in your home community, all the facilitators who take this, they say, I swear I get more out of this than the kids, because they get to go on these business visits. And obviously they're helping lead and coordinate it. But being kind of that guide on the side as a facilitator versus a stage on a stage as a teacher, this is a very different way of education. But I also think it's the way the education is trending and should be.
Yeah, man, that's really good stuff. Hey, share just a few kind of big success stories that have come, and you can pick a few of your favorites, but you've got a ton of really cool things. I agree with something you said earlier too, that we often expect way too little of our teenagers. They're capable of so much more than we often give them credit for. So just brag on them a little bit. What are some of the cool things you've seen come out of this program?
Yeah, so I have this problem. I see hundreds and hundreds of success stories every year. And every year I'm like, oh, there can't be anything new that blows me away. Because some of them, you'll see a reoccurring photo business or candle business or car detailing. Those were the top 3 businesses I saw last school year. I kind of studied what all their individual businesses were. But if you're going to do that, do it well. And those kids can be very successful. But I'll be honest, every couple of years I'll see an idea and I'm like, man, this is better than stuff I'm seeing on Shark Tank. 2 years ago, there's a young lady. her name is Megan. I'm just going to say first names for the sake of this podcast. But she liked to wear very, professional and cute dresses to CEO every day, because we teach these kids to put your best foot forward. You need to dress business professional. We're trying to change the sweatpant generation into going back to kind of the way, our parents were. And, there's no reason you can't put a suit coat on and wear a tie and dress nice. And so we expect these kids to dress business professional. It's one of the expectations of the learning environment. But in dressing business professional, young Megan, she, for the first couple of weeks, her mom was there to help her zip up the dress. But one day her mom left early. So how was she going to zip up her dress? So she, like an entrepreneur, all the entrepreneurs she'd been meeting, she said, you know what, I can just put a clasp on the zipper and actually can do it without anyone. And then she realized, I'm solving a problem. I wonder if anybody else has this problem. So she created a clasp on a dress zipper, zips up, goes around the neck, and is a beautiful necklace that is also a functional tool. And the product is called Zipper Up. And she created that during COVID. And I said, I'd never seen this. She's working patent pending on this idea. And so what fires me up is there are still new ideas out there these kids can think of as they solve problems that they see in everyday life. So that's one. And what I want to point out about this young lady, and this is so indicative of high school kids across the country, there's a lot of limiting beliefs and a lot of kids. There's thousands of kids that talk themselves out of taking CEO every year. And we work hard at the Institute to be cutting edge, to inspire kids to be a part of a business course like this, because they might come in and say, oh, I don't come from an entrepreneurial family, or I have a bad GPA, or you know what, I don't know if I want to put that much effort in my senior year. I might just want to coast. And what we're amazed by is how many kids, if they just apply for the class and put their best foot forward, they realize they're capable of so much, and they realize what they're capable of. And so Megan was one of those young ladies who came in. She's like, I didn't have a business idea when I started, but the business idea found her because she started learning to think like an entrepreneur. So that's a quick one. I love that one. We've got a lot of young men that I specifically spend time mentoring with, because mentorship is a big part of my belief system, but also our learning environment. Every student going through CEO, besides creating their own business, has a one-to-one mentor from the business community paired with them. And why that's so mission critical today is, it might be common that a high school kid might have a coach, or maybe if they do high school plays or musicals, they might have an instructor or a band director in their life. Maybe they got that youth pastor, or priest, or someone that's a person of faith in their life. But what's very uncommon and not naturally occurring? Someone in the business world that's mentoring or coaching these young people. Oh. So what I believe is happening with our learning environment, a few things are happening. One is, why isn't CEO naturally occurring in communities where the business community is getting involved in the education of their future workforce? That's what we've kind of tested, proven, and we can help communities get up and going over pretty quickly, right? But at the same time, getting business people invested in actually speaking into the lives of the next generation, that's why we have one-to-one mentorship in these classes. And so even after CEO, I mentor a lot of these alumni that I really connect with locally, always young men. But some of these young men I'm spending time with, they have just been highly successful. And what blows me away, and I kind of want to tie it into an idea for your community, and then I'll, get back to these stories. But two really good quotes that just stick with me that I think anybody listening today that's considering doing a side hustle needs to consider is Rory Vaden. He has a great book called Take the Stairs. I hope that's the title. I'm pretty sure that's it. But Rory Vaden's an amazing Christian author. He's an amazing author and also happens to be Christian. And he actually spent time with all of our students on we do a national live experience where we bring guests that they wouldn't otherwise be able to meet as a high school student. And so Rory was on there last season, and he has this great quote: is, a business is only as good as its first sale. And I hope I'm not butchering that quote, but more or less that's the idea, is a business is only as good as its first sale. It's not even one of his most common quotes, but what sticks out is there's a lot of people out there who has business ideas and they just keep talking about the ideas. Yep. The reason I fiercely love seeing what high school kids are capable of. And by the way, if high school kids can do this, so can you. If you're sitting out there and you're in your late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. One of my favorite entrepreneurs that I met spent time with over the last 10 years, she didn't create her first business until 55. She's a multimillionaire to this day. And so there's no such thing as a late bloomer. Are you going to take the ideas that are just in the back of your mind and actually be brave enough to just start selling, right? So if your business is only as good as your first sale, and then if you want to take some Mark Cuban advice, for those of you who watch Shark Tank, There's a lot of people who are quote unquote, they call themselves entrepreneurs, but he uses that term, if you've heard it, wantrepreneurs. There's a ton of people out there who are wantrepreneurs, but stop being a wantrepreneur, become an entrepreneur, build a business idea and get it to its first sale. That's what we're challenging these students to do. And that's what we all can do in our own personal lives if you feel that call to create a side hustle. So I just wanted to offer that encouragement with these two remaining stories. Do you want me to jump into the stories? I know I'm truly being a preacher kid right now.
Oh, this is really good, man. Yeah, keep going with the stories. I've got some follow up, but go ahead. Keep rolling.
So the reason I wanted to share those two base ideas is what amazes me is for these students that create these young entrepreneurs, these young professionals, they may create an idea. And it might not be a home run idea to start, but sometimes it's not their first business, their second business, or their third business or venture they create that's, their multi-million-dollar idea, but it takes each of those businesses to set them up for the next one. And so I look at, there's a young guy, and I'm not going to say, again, Justin's his first name, but he started just being this like nerdy kid in high school who was just repairing computers, didn't, have a ton of friends, just always kind of tinkering on computers. So he goes from computer repair, and he even started doing some wholesale distribution of like computer parts, right? And became a dealer for Amazon. But then when he took CEO, the line that he tells me after he took CEO is, I went from being someone who was going to work for a computer repair company to actually being someone who owns my own computer repair company. So what fires me up, he goes from computer repair to part distribution. He actually got into installation and future-proofing business, doing security systems, server racks, everything in between for all the businesses in his region. So much so that he has clients all over the U.S., Florida, Michigan. He's a kid based out of Illinois, and he told me his tax guy said, you really need to learn what a tax write-off is. You need to buy a truck, and he's so cheap, just puts all his money in the bank. And they're like, his tax guy told him, you'd be losing money not to buy this truck. So he buys a truck and he drives it to all the sites. I'm like, Justin, why don't you fly? He goes, I'm not old enough to rent a car. And I'm like, well, what do your clients think about that? He goes, they don't ask me how old I am. They just ask me, can I do the job? What's the price? And I do a great job. So I just drive to all my job sites, even if it's 16, 20 hours away. And so so his first business, computer repair, part distribution. Then he got an installation and future-proofing businesses. Then I just heard that he now does all the electrical installs for wireless towers in the Midwest for one specific large, I'm not going to say the company's name, but it's like Verizon or AT&T.
Sure.
I'll just say that. So he's got that national contract for the Midwest, and he's just crushing it. So that's his third, fourth business. And now on the side, he's doing real estate development. He's buying buildings in his local town, revamping them because he wants to give back to the community he took CEO. Wow. And so that's what fires me up. There's so many of these kids. Another one, tennis lessons to hot dog stand to real estate development. Another young lady, piano lessons to HR. She joins a team and goes to school and gets into HR leadership development. And now is a high-end program manager inside an industry-leading company and is very well respected. So some students stay true entrepreneurs. Some join the workforce and they're the best future hires for all your local businesses. But that solution mindedness, that entrepreneurial thinking is needed no matter which path they choose.
Man, I love all of that. And you've shared some other really cool stories with me too. You mentioned something, and I already had this on my notes to talk to you about, and that's mentoring. You said when I first met you that mentorship is a big deal for you. And you're in this weird season. It's not a weird season of life. It's a natural season of life where you're kind of now not the youngest guy anymore. You're also not the oldest guy. So you're kind of in a place of giving mentoring a lot, but also in a place of receiving it. So I'm just going to set this up and you can take it any direction you want. I mean, certainly you've talked about, the power of mentoring others and mentoring the next generation, which is really cool. How do you go about finding mentors for your life? And when do you think that's going to stop for you? When do you think you'll reach a point where you're like, I've been mentored enough, I don't need that anymore?
I will always be searching for people I can learn from. And I think that's, it's such a key to why am I a 35-year-old who's an executive director of a national organization? There's no reason at 35 I should be where I'm at. But I think so much of it I can attribute to I've had great people speak into my life from, very intentionally. These people don't just show up in your life, but finding people who can shave time off your learning curve because they're a step or two ahead of you in life, or they've done many of the things that you're looking to learn to do. And so this is At 35, I'm in a season of life where I have two great mentors. I'm also old enough where I've actually even lost a few mentors. And so that's where I just always have this encouragement. If you are out there and you have had a mentor in your life and they're getting up there in age, make sure you tell them what they mean. I've lost a mentor and I miss them every day. And I wished I could tell him, what I'm up to now. Right.
Yeah.
So I've got two mentors currently. I would say actively I'm mentoring 5 young men, and then indirectly, a lot more, but I spend time pretty regularly with 5 young men. But what I'm amazed by on a national level is, so many people are searching for mentorship. They just don't know how to find it. And so that's where I'm always curious what's less naturally occurring, which is someone from an older generation or that has that wisdom to go to a young buck like myself and says, hey, I can really see you need to learn or you're learning in the season. Can I spend an hour with you? Right. Or is it more common that a young person today will go up to someone who has the wisdom, the insight, the instinct, and say, can I get an hour of your time? I'm trying to learn these items. And what I see kind of for the most part, most people don't think to do that. It's scary to do that, especially if it's a weak tie or a loose connection. But finding people that, may not even been in your circle and being brave enough to ask them for an hour of time can really change your life if you learn how to do it and do it well. So that's something I believe in. It's actually something I'm planning to write a book on in the next 24 months. And it's something that our young people, because they have this one-to-one mentor in this CEO learning environment, they learn that they can keep asking people for advice and help and just ask them for coffee one time. Sometimes they become relationships where they become their future bosses. Sometimes they become relationships where they're, I have one of my mentors I've had for 6 years and completely changed my life and challenged me to do things I never thought I was capable of. So I am a huge advocate for mentorship. And I think it would be cool. I'm going to take a breath here, but defining the difference between, and I'm on a pursuit of what's the difference between therapy, coaching, and mentorship. And can I just making it a question back to you, John? You guys are just amazing coaches. I look at you even as mentors and how my definition of the word. But what do you consider yourself, more of a coach, or and how would you delineate between those three?
Yeah, I don't know so much about. Well, I will speak to the therapy side of things, but here's how I've always approached it. As a pastor, I'll tell you this: it used to drain me to be in that role of a counselor. And I would tell you, counseling is something I hate to do. It drains me. I don't love sitting there listening to all these people's problems, even though that was kind of expected with that role. And I would even have people tell me I was good at it, which I hated hearing that because it's like, well, I hate doing it. So please don't tell me this is helpful because I don't like it. And I wish you wouldn't like it when we do this. Here's what I've come to realize, though, that coaching and counseling have some similarities, but here's a big difference. Counseling primarily looks in the rearview mirror. Let's go back to the point of the pain. Let's peel back the layers. Let's get down to the wound. And that's necessary work. But I realize for me, coaching is much more forward focused. Where are you trying to go? And that's where I live. I spend most of my time out in the future, and my future is always brighter than my past. So I'm not saying there haven't been times I needed to look in the rearview mirror and go deal with some stuff in the past. I get way more excited, though, about what's out in the future, and I love helping other people with their future. So there's definitely some crossover there. A good coach will help you look backwards, and a good counselor will help you look forward. But for me, coaching is much more forward focused. Therapy to me is more like there's healing that needs to take place. And again, there's times in our life where that has to happen, but I think that can come through coaching for sure. I mean, I think therapy can happen in any of those settings. But leadership, you mentioned that. I think coaching and leadership are synonymous. I really do. A good coach is a leader, and a good leader is not going to leave you where you are. A good leader is going to help cast vision. Let's get clear on where we're going. Now, follow me, we'll go. Maybe in coaching, it's not so much follow me, it's I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to be by your side, but I'm not leaving you here. We're going to this place that you say you want to go. Now that we have that target on the wall, I'm going with you on this journey, and we're leading them. So, that's where I feel like for many pastors, we're naturally set to be coaches because it's so much of what we do in ministry. We encourage, we coach. We just don't call it that, and we certainly don't charge prices that a professional coach is worthy of being paid. We charge our pastor prices, which is usually nothing, and then give hours and hours and hours of our life to other that is never compensated for. So anyway, I'm taking that down a rabbit hole you didn't ask to go down. But
no, actually, it ties in perfectly. It's exactly where we wanted to go because we live in a world that's starved for people to be heard. People need to be listened to today. People are so hungry for truth and challenge, and so I see why the therapy industry is just growing and growing and growing. There's a need there, mental health. It's a thing, no matter what, different people in the audience believe, like there's a need for a lot of that. 100%. But what fires me up is, on that professional leadership side, let's say you are an entrepreneur, and this is just the last little direction I want to take it, because I think this is it ties in so perfectly, is if you're an entrepreneur, you don't have a built-in boss or mentor, right? Or you don't have a built-in boss to be that coach, that leader. And so that's why I think it's even more mission critical that whether you're young or old entrepreneur, that you find people who are in the industry and space that you're doing, or just someone that you respect, that seems to have the expertise that might help you with the next step of your side hustle or venture, right?
Yeah.
And
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just it can shave time off your learning curve if you really want to get there. That's the reason participating in this community regularly, I would highly recommend, because you guys are bringing so many like-minded people, iron sharpens iron, in here to talk. And that's why I've listened to probably 5 or 6 of your past podcasts, because you have those people on this very podcast. So podcasts are great, but if why don't you reach out to those people? And that's my challenge, is those one-on-one connections. Asking someone for an hour is not that hard to do. You're not asking them to be your best friend for the rest of your life, but just saying, hey, can I get an hour of your time? And here's the pro tips. I teach this to high school students, is if you know what you want to learn, and if you know why you respect the person, that's all you need to make a good ask or good request of an hour. So you say, hey, I'm looking to learn this. I respect you because will you spend an hour with me? And that relationship has actually led me to, getting to know one of my other current mentors, which I asked him for a one-time meeting. We talked for 18 months, and now I pretty regularly spend time with them.
Yep. That's how it works. And what you'll find with that caliber of mentors, much of the time they are willing to make an investment where they see good ground, where they get asked for a ton of time requests from people who want something from them, but where they see a good investment, they're often very generous people and willing to give, and so make the ask. But I'm glad you have said this, because really this is an encouragement I want to give to our audience. Austin, and I'll complain for a minute and then you can respond to this. One of my gripes with pastors, I love them dearly, love the church, love pastors, but sometimes they bug the crap out of me. And one of my irritations with them is largely there's a poverty mentality that often keeps them from investing in themselves. I mean, simply put, I can't afford to hire a coach. I can't afford to join a mastermind or be a part of a course or whatever. And I get that. We're trying to help them overcome the mindset thing. But I think there's another part to it as well, and that is pastors, by and large, are in a little bubble where they are the experts. They are the ones that people come to for the knowledge and the questions and all this. And so even though they're generally quick to read books and seek some wisdom in that way, I think there's something with pastors often where they're like, I don't ask people for help. I give help to people. And I would say probably if I had to paint a profile of the average caricature of the people who come to us, they're not the 20-something pastor. We have some of those, but it's much more the guy or gal that's at the later end of their career. They're in their late 40s, early 50s, mid 50s, early 60s, and they're recognizing, oh man, this pastor gig that I've been doing has not prepared me well for the future. And they're ready to talk about it. But then they come to pause when it's that time to like make an investment and like, let's go beyond just listening to a free podcast and let's really help you get somewhere. You used a phrase, how mentoring can help shave time off the learning curve. So I think what I was going to do is just wrap up by letting you get pastors. You've grown up in a pastor's home and family. You've been around the church world. Certainly you've connected us already to some great pastors. So you get us, even though you're not full-time pastor. So speak to our audience and encourage them, if you will. And you can take that any direction you want. But what would you say to that pastor that's like, I want to have a business of my own, or at least love the thought of having additional income. I can't afford to make any investments into my growth and development at this time.
Yeah. Wow. I have so many feelings and thoughts right now. I definitely kind of have a wave of emotion because of how much, I mean, I haven't met all of you listening today, but how much love and just care I have for each of you. And the reason I feel this emotion is you guys have done so much to impact others. And I just want to think about, just in the last year, what are the, 3, 4, 5 conversations where you've talked to someone at their most broken point? You guys have been that listening ear.
Yep.
And you've been those people that have been there through tough times. And even sometimes it might not be they're broken just because it's bad. Someone just needs an encouragement or a push. Like, I know you just lost the job and it's tough. You've already seen them bounce back, and they found maybe even a better job that's really set them up for what God's calling them to do. And you've been the people on the forefront of encouraging your congregation, your people to do that. It breaks my heart to think that if you're not looking for that in your own lives, because guess what? God's put people on this earth for you to give you that same encouragement. I mean, it's starting here on this podcast. If you've listened to this point, John and Les are people in your court that whether they've ever met you or not, I know they're praying for you and they're thinking about you. This is my first time on the pod, and but same way, I know you're doing good work, but there are people out there that are in your court. And I think if you ask God, who out there should I talk to? Should I be learning from? You kind of got to open yourself up to it. And I know it's tough because you're always the giver. You're always the wise sage. You're always the one that has to have the answers. But that's also a very dangerous place to stay. If you're the only giving answers, but you're not, looking for truth on your own outside of even, the stuff you're reading, like there are great people out there who could be a mentor to you. So I just don't miss the opportunity to have great people in your life and have deep relationships that can challenge you. And I will say one caveat that kind of ties into just the close of all the things I talk about with CEO is all the people who are these mentors and business visits and guest speakers and come to these classes, they say the same thing the facilitators say, man, I've learned a ton from these students. So maybe it's just volunteering something outside of the church, putting yourself around young people, because the mentorship street, I did talk to a mentor the other day. I know I'm supposed to be here mentoring this kid, but this kid understands how to sell online better than I do. And so they're both mentoring each other at the same time. And so mentorship's not even just about age, and I know I'm just a 35-year-old kid, but if you want to know stuff about business, get my email from John, look me up, and I'd be happy to, get to know you better. But I think a closing thought of anything that I've said today about, the CEO program and the transformational experience and how it changes lives and students and communities across the country. If that sounds interesting, the best way to get in contact with my team or myself is we've got a website called discoverceo.com. So if you visit discoverceo.com, that's a great way just to kind of see this national movement and kind of the mission that we're on to install the entrepreneurship the entrepreneurial mindset at the high school level. So yeah, thanks for having me on, John. I love your community, and I'm actually excited. Just like I want to see my high school kids every year, what businesses they're going to create. I truly think there's $1 million ideas in the minds of people listening today, if they just learn how to take that next step.
Man, well, Austin, it's been a pleasure getting to hang out with you. I love knowing you, and I believe when you say you care about this community, it's genuine. I can sense like it's an authentic thing. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. I know this conversation is going to add value to our community. So all the best, my friend. I'm sure we'll talk again in the near future. Well, hey, thanks for watching this episode of the Entre Pastors Podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we release a new episode. If you'd like to get connected to other pastors who are learning to think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs, then we invite you to check us out on Facebook. Just search for the Entre Pastors Connect group, answer a few of our simple questions there, and we'd love to include you in the conversations. And if you're really ready to go to the next level, then we invite you to join our Entre Pastors membership community. When you become a monthly subscriber, you will receive access to courses, exclusive community, and coaching that will help you along in your own Entre Pastors journey. If there's anything else we can do to serve you, please visit us at entrepastors.com, and we will do our best to serve you there. God bless everybody. See you soon.